Well, returning to our top story, the latest manoeuvres in Canberra. And at the start of this second week of negotiations, I'm joined now from our Parliament House studio by the Deputy Opposition Leader, Julie Bishop. Good to have you with us.
Good evening, Lee.
The Coalition's now moved ahead of Labor in the two-party preferred stakes. Does this make a difference to your dealings with independents?
Lee, the facts are these. Labor lost 16 seats at the election. Labor lost its governing majority. Labor lost the election. Julia Gillard claimed that the two-party preferred was the bar and that it was clear Labor had won on the two-party preferred. Well, that's now not the case, and it seems that the Coalition is not only ahead on the primary vote but also on the two-party preferred. We hold more seats in the House of Representatives. We hold more Senate seats than Labor. So it's hard to see what moral authority or legitimacy Julia Gillard can now claim to try and seek to govern. The fact is we do need 76 seats in the House of Representatives. That's why we're undertaking sensible and methodical negotiations with the independents so that we can form a stable and competent government. Now, I believe that the Coalition can form stable and competent government, and I'm hopeful that the independents will enable us to do that.
You say, based on those figures, that Julia Gillard has no legitimacy to form a government. Does that mean that you also think the independents now have no right to enable her to do so?
What I'm saying is that Labor, for all intents and purposes, lost the election. But we need 76 seats in order to govern in the House of Representatives, and that's why we're undertaking negotiations now with the independents so that we are able to form a stable and competent government, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to do that.
And so do these figures coming through this evening change the way that you will be dealing with the independents?
Well, Lee, it takes away Julia Gillard's only plank. She set the bar and said that it was clear Labor was ahead on the two-party preferred vote. In fact, she said they had won the two-party preferred vote. Well, that is not the case. And at the time of going to air, it seems that the Coalition is going ahead quite significantly on the two-party preferred. We're already over 500,000 votes ahead on the primary vote, more seats in the House, more Senate positions. So on that basis, we hope that the independents will see that the Coalition is able to form a stable and competent government for the next 3 years.
In the 1998 election, Labor won the two-party preferred vote, but of course it didn't form government because it didn't have the most seats in the House of Representatives. So doesn't history dictate then that the two-party preferred vote is irrelevant?
Well, Julia Gillard set it as the bar. She said that was the plank for Labor being able to form government. Well, that plank is now falling away. And it comes down to seats, of course, and that's why we need 76 seats. So we will have 73 seats. That's why we're negotiating with the independents. But on all counts now, Lee, on all counts, the primary vote, the two-party preferred, the number of seats in the House, the number of Senate seats, the Coalition is ahead.
The Coalition leadership met today as part of these negotiations with the independent Andrew Wilkie. Did you walk away from that meeting thinking that he'll back your side or not?
The meeting was between Tony Abbott and Andrew Wilkie, and I understand it was a very constructive meeting, but no specific agreement was reached, of course. I understand that Andrew Wilkie presented a list of his priorities, and they are matters that are of concern to him and matters that he wishes to progress over the next 3 years. And Tony Abbott took that list, and obviously we'll continue discussing those matters with him.
And which of those ideas initially do you think you would be able to support?
Well, I understand Mr Wilkie put forward a couple as matters of priority for him, including the Hobart Hospital. So obviously these are issues that we'll continue to discuss with him. He said it wasn't a wish list, it said it was his priorities, and I would expect all members of the House of Representatives to come to Canberra with ideas and priorities that they have and that they want to achieve in their time in the House.
Mr Wilkie is interested in a lot of things that aren't Coalition policy. He wants a price on carbon, a conscience vote on gay marriage, a withdrawal of federal government approval for the Gunns Tamar River pulp mill. It would be highly unlikely, wouldn't it, that the Coalition would budge on any of those things?
Well, clearly we're in the middle of negotiations. Obviously what we want to do is negotiate in good faith and not promise anything that is not deliverable, and that will be our guiding philosophy. And these negotiations will continue. I understand that the three, if I can call them the three rural independence, will be meeting with a number of our shadow ministers over the next few days, as well as with government ministers. So there's quite a few meetings to go yet.
In 2003, Andrew Wilkie, of course, famously blew the whistle on intelligence around the war in Iraq, and the Howard government attempted to publicly discredit him. Tony Abbott has apologised for that already to Mr Wilkie. Did that matter come up in the meeting today, do you know?
No, I'm not aware of that. I do know, as is already public, that Tony Abbott did apologise to him for the circumstances surrounding that issue back then, and I understand Mr Wilkie accepted that. I am told that it was a very cordial, congenial meeting, as I would expect from Tony Abbott and from Mr Wilkie.
If we can turn to the West Australian National, Tony Crook, what is the coalition leadership offering him to persuade him to function as part of your team?
Well, Tony Crook is a Western Australian National, and I just point out that the Western Australian Liberal Party and the West Australian National Party are operating extremely well together in partnership in government at the state level, and that has been the case since 2008. So that's an example where the Liberal and National Party continue to work in partnership for stable, competent government. As I understand it, Tony Crook attended the National Party meeting here in Canberra today, and he will be fighting for issues for his electorate, and he's made that plain, and I respect him for that. Now, as to the arrangements with the National Party, well, that's a matter for Warren Truss and Tony Crook to discuss publicly, but as I understand it, he was at the meeting today.
You're from WA as well, of course. Do you actually know him? Have you had any dealings with him previously?
No, I don't know him. I've not met him, but he's certainly very well known and respected in Western Australia. He was the chair of the Royal Flying Doctor for a number of years, and so he's well known and respected figure from Western Australia.
He says that he wants the coalition to endorse his $850 million plan. He wants that money to go every year to regional WA. Is that something that you can meet him on?
Well, obviously we all want a better deal for regional Australia, and that includes regional Western Australia. That's part of coalition policy, a better deal for the bush. And so I'm sure that we're all on the same agenda when it comes to trying to get better services into regional Australia, including regional Western Australia.
And if you're all on the same agenda, then why is there this confusion about whether or not he's going to be supporting your side?
Well, I don't know that there's any confusion about some fundamental issues, particularly the mining tax. As I understand it, he will not be supporting a Labor government if it introduces a mining tax. Now, the mining tax was fundamental to Labor's election platform, and Mr Crook has made it clear that he would not support a Labor government that introduced a mining tax. So I think there are some clear agenda items upon which there is agreement.
The Liberal Albie Schultz, though, has pointed out that Mr Crook relied on Labor preferences to wrest that seat away from Wilson Tuckey, and he said today, quote, "There's double standards with some of these people, and I've got no doubt that this bloke's going to be a problem." Is that a widespread view in the Liberal Party about Mr Crook?
No, it's not. As I said, I haven't met him yet. I'm delighted to welcome him to Canberra. Always pleased to see somebody from the National Party, from the Liberal Party, from Western Australia. The Liberal and National Party have been the most successful political partnership in Australian history. I think for the last 60 years, the Liberal National Coalition have been in government for about 40 of those years. So we're an extremely successful partnership, and long may that be the case. Now, there can sometimes be disagreements between us. I think Warren Truss said that today. We're like a family, and it's a good analogy. But at the end of the day, we believe in some of the same fundamental issues. We have the same values and beliefs, and we've been a very successful political partnership, which I hope will continue into the future.
Well, if it has been a successful partnership, if you do share a common agenda, if Mr Crook is opposed to the mining tax, which would mean he can't support Labor, then why hasn't he actually just come straight out and said, OK, I am a member of the coalition, I'm number 73 or number 74 for them?
Well, in Western Australia, the National Party is not actually in coalition with the Liberal Party. They have formed an alliance and are governing very successfully as an alliance, but it's a different model from what we have in Canberra, where it is a coalition. Now, Mr Crook comes from the West Australian National Party, but I hope that in Canberra he will continue to represent his electorate, and it's a strong regional electorate from WA, and I'm sure he'll do a very good job at that.
I mentioned Albie Schultz before in regards to Mr Crook. He's also rung Tony Windsor to give him a serve. Bill Heffernan has made an unwelcome call to Rob Oakeshot's home. What sort of warning has Tony Abbott delivered to coalition members about their conduct towards the independents?
Well, I've spoken to both Bill Heffernan and Albie Schultz. In the case of Albie, he counts Tony Windsor as one of his friends. They've known each other for well over 20 years. They were in the New South Wales Parliament together. They now serve in the federal Parliament together. And Albie made a phone call. He says he didn't threaten anybody and absolutely denies that. And they've been friends for a long time. In the case of Bill, he assures me he was trying to be humorous. He assures me he didn't mean any harm and that he has apologised for any offence caused. The independents themselves have said that the phone calls are not helpful. I take them at their word. I hope that everybody else will. And I'm sure Tony Abbott has made that clear in conversations he has had with the individuals involved.
So are you confident there won't be any more episodes of this nature?
Well, we can't stop friends from contacting each other, but overall I think it's best if the negotiations are left to the leadership team, and over the next few days, as I said, there will be a number of meetings with our shadow ministers, and we hope that there will be some kind of conclusion sooner rather than later.
Is it possible that ill-disciplined members of the coalition could cost you government?
Well, we have a very different party approach than the Labor Party. We allow a very free discussion in our party rooms. We allow members to cross the floor without there being ramifications. I mean, that is a stark contrast with the Labor Party that has this Stalinist approach to anybody who speaks out of caucus. They're not allowed to cross the floor, otherwise they get expelled from the party. That's not the case in the Liberal Party or the National Party. And we have robust discussions, and I think that's healthy. And long may it continue to be the case that Liberal and National Party members do speak their mind.
But nonetheless, in the past few days, we've had Albie Schultz, we've had Bill Heffernan, we had the election night sniping between Windsor and Joyce and Catter and Trust. We've got Mr Crook saying, we've got Mr Crook saying that he's not sure if he's not going to be just sitting on the crossbenches. We've got another National Senator, John Williams, feeling neglected. When you've got all of that going on, how can you persuade the independents and voters that you'll be able to deliver a stable government?
Tony Abbott has, in the last 8 months, brought the coalition together, and we are a strong and united team. I think the contrast with Labor, though, is worth considering. And we've had not only the national president of the ALP and Anna Bligh taking a swipe at New South Wales and the machine men of New South Wales, and Christina Keneally taking a swipe back, and Bob Hawke blaming particular Labor members for failing the team, and then Carl Bittar and Mark Arbib having to defend their reputations, and the sniping goes on the Labor side. I mean, this is a party that knifed their own Prime Minister and essentially removed the right of the Australian people to judge his performance. Now, Julia Gillard, given the makeup of the Labor Party, can't guarantee that she'll be the leader of the Labor Party should the polls go against her.
But at this time, sorry to interrupt, but at this time, it's not the Labor Party and Julia Gillard that are having to rein in rogue elements from trying to strong-arm independents.
Well, I would have thought that some of the comments on election night from the Labor Party were pretty damning. But yes, there's a bit of conversation going on. But I think the independents have made it clear that it's not helpful. I take them at their word. I'm sure my colleagues will as well. And as I said, Tony Abbott has been an extremely collegial leader. He takes advice, he listens to people, and he will negotiate extremely effectively with the independents. I have no doubt at all.
Julie Bishop, thank you very much for coming in tonight.
Thank you, Lee.